Hi everyone. I want to talk about how we migrated a WordPress blog to Gatsby. To give you a little bit of motivation, so I work at a company called Theodo. We're a web and mobile agency. And we have this amazing tech blog where we share all of our learnings that we encounter in our projects, which has great content, but it's a bit painful because it's in WordPress. So I write some articles in it, and also I read it quite a lot. And there are a couple of problems with WordPress that I just want to get quickly into. First one, for the readers, WordPress tends to be quite slow, especially on mobile, which is where most people actually read articles. So to give you an idea, this is a Google Lighthouse audit. You can see like performance metric is 24%, quite low, and then the time to interactive is like 16.4 seconds, so it's really not great. And this is like using a fast 3G network, a simulated fast 3G network. I'm going to get back to these later on, so keep that in mind. The second issue that I have quite a bit of trouble with is getting the code formatting right. So we write a lot of technical articles, a lot of code in them, and WordPress isn't really meant for them. So if you don't do anything, like if you just naively use the editor, your code doesn't look good. Obviously, you don't want to do that. The solution I tend to go for is to actually use the HTML editor directly and just write it using HTML. So we've got the code pre-tags, and then we set the language in there, here. And it looks like that, which is better. The alternative as well is in WordPress, you have these things called shortcodes. Some of you may know them, which look like that. You tell it the language, and then you write your code there, and it renders it like that, which also works. But the point I'm trying to make is WordPress isn't really suitable for technical blogs. So that's kind of like where the first idea of like moving to Markdown came about, because Markdown is something that developers are very comfortable with, and it's like all over GitHub as well. And then another problem as a developer, WordPress is just kind of a bit legacy. It's not that amazing to work with. I mean, I haven't got a whole lot of experience in actually doing WordPress development, but the little bit I have done, it's been quite slow in actually trying to get started and trying to deliver some valuable features for it. Plus, you also have, like you hear quite often with WordPress that you have to think about security quite a lot, and there've been quite a few like incidents of like security holes. So that's kind of where the question came about of, can we do better? And what we thought about is using this, the JAMstack, in fact, so switching over to the JAMstack technologies. The stack that we went for in this case was using Gatsby. Most of you are probably familiar with Gatsby, but just a two-line summary. It's a static site generator, and if you're developing in Gatsby, you're using React and GraphQL. We use Netlify, which is a hosting provider. It's a service. You can go a very long way without having to pay anything for it, actually, which is really nice. And it deploys your Gatsby site to a worldwide CDN, so to a content delivery network. And then finally, we use GitHub basically as a CMS. So we keep our content, our articles, as Markdown files in the GitHub repository, which is nice. They're in version control. And then we connect our GitHub to Netlify, and we have like automatic deployments and a bunch of other features, which I'm going to explain later, that come with Netlify. So this is kind of the stack behind it. So now the idea is like we've got all our Markdown posts, all our WordPress posts. We want to migrate them over. So the question is like, how do you do it? What's kind of the best strategy to go around this? Before I go into actually migrating the posts, I just want to mention one alternative solution, which might work in your case better, which is the WordPress API. So it's actually possible, if you just want a Gatsby front-end and you don't care about like having Markdown files for your content, you can use the WordPress API and connect your Gatsby blog directly to that using this plugin, the WordPress source plugin. The requirement you have for WordPress is version 4.7, which is actually a higher version that we currently have on our Theodo blog. So the benefits you get from that is you don't need to like migrate all of the content. You can keep WordPress as your current CMS if you're okay with it, and you just use Gatsby for the front end. But there are some drawbacks to this strategy, which is mainly that you do need to like manually trigger deployment every time when you make a change in your articles in the admin. And also your content is not in version control. That's kind of one of the nice features you have by keeping everything in GitHub. You can always roll back. Cool, so with that out of the way, let's jump into it. The first step you want to do, you actually just want to start off creating a Gatsby blog. Gatsby has a ton of starters, which are super cool in like getting started quickly, so you can have something up and running in like 5 minutes. If you haven't done a lot of Gatsby development before, I would actually suggest checking out the Gatsby tutorial. You learn a lot about it, and at the end of it, you actually come out with a functioning blog. And the main plugins that it's using underneath is the source, like the Gatsby source file system plugin to read the markdown files, and then the transformer remark plugin to actually render the markdown files as HTML on your blog. And you also want to like set up the initial deployment as well. So we did all of that, and with that, it's a bit zoomed in. That was kind of like the version 0.1 that we had after doing all of this. I mean, this is just lorem ipsum text, but you can see like at least you kind of get the nice, quick static site features out of it. The next step, which I suggest doing, is actually putting some real content on there, because having real content early on really highlights some of the problems you're going to run into quickly. So in my case, I actually had 2 articles that I already had as markdown files. So here's an article that I'm going to keep using as an example. So the first thing I did was actually just put them on there on the Gatsby blog to see what they look like on the version I just showed you. And I immediately ran into some problems. First one is that it wasn't actually rendering the images. Like the quick solution for this is to use another plugin that reads the markdown files and gets the images and then renders them in HTML. This doesn't work for SVGs and GIFs, so for those ones, there's another plugin you can use, which is quite nice. Second issue I ran into was that the code rendering doesn't actually work out of the box. So for that, you have this amazing plugin called Prism.js, which does all the syntax highlighting. With that one, we actually had something that started to look a little better. So these are the 2 articles that we had. And images work, syntax highlighting works, and all of this was quite fast to do because I already had some articles there. So this was like a matter of like 2 hours to set up. So you've got a basic block up and running. Next step now, you want to like actually get all of your content over. So every WordPress blog has this tool here that allows you to export your entire content as an XML file. And it looks something like that. So it's just a big XML file. It starts off with like some of the basic data of your blog, so the title of your blog, a description of your blog, and so on. Then you have a lot of data about like all the authors you have in your blog, like all the users. You've got all your categories and all the tags. And then after that, you have like the data you actually care about, which is your articles. You have a whole lot of these items. Each one of them is a current blog post on your WordPress blog. You've got some of the metadata, and then here's all the content. So this is the same article I just showed you. So with this export, the main strategy basically is you want to loop through all of these items, like through all of them. For each of them, create a markdown file, grab the content to render it. And then also, ideally, you'd like to download any of these images, because here they're actually loaded from a server. But if you want to keep the speediness of it, you could directly parse these image tags, download the image, and then save them in your GitHub repo as well. You don't have to do all of that by yourself. Luckily, there's a cool little tool here, like a Node.js script called Gatsby WordPress Migrate. It was released something like 2 months ago. It's pretty fresh. And it's kind of trying to address this need, because there are a lot of people now with the JAMstack rising in popularity who want to move from WordPress to JAMstack technology. To give you this is what it does. So it takes your XML, and then basically it renders it to a markdown file here, puts it in its own little folder with all the images downloaded. This is kind of the end result that you get out from it. And it has all the metadata up here as the header of your markdown file. So to give you an idea of how it works underneath, it's a whole lot of code here, but let's go through it. So you read your XML file, you parse it using this XML to JS parsing library. And then basically, you start looping through all of the items. Here we filter out all of the posts that aren't published, because actually we don't care about them. We just want to get the published posts. And then for all of them, we grab this content encoded. This is, sorry, this is what I showed you here. So this is that tag. We grab the entire content, it's the HTML of it. And then we want to get a list of all our images. For that, we use this library called Cheerio, which you can think of as Lodash, but for the server. So we pass the content, grab the list of images, and then grab the source attribute here. And also, we construct a file name for the images. Next, so if you look down here, the next step is actually in the content that I showed you. You want to remove like this source here from being a full URL to just being the local file path of the new image that you're gonna have downloaded afterwards. So that's what the regex does here. And then finally, we transform all that HTML into Markdown code. And for that, we're using a library called turndown here, which is pretty simple. That's all the code you need for it. You just instantiate it, pass it your big string of content, and you end up with Markdown on the other side. Next, you want to get some of the metadata. So these are the titles, the creator. You also want to get like the post name. So there's a lot more like underneath the content here. And depending on the plugins you have, there's actually quite a bit in there. And finally, you actually then write the Markdown file to your file system using the normal file system library. So here we construct the header, have the content down here, and then write it out. And the last bit is we just fetch the images using the standard JavaScript fetch. So there isn't any like magic going on in the script. It's pretty simple. Here I've showed you a simplified version. The actual library does a lot more like error handling underneath, which I've stripped out for the sake of clarity. And yeah, you end up with this. So it actually works pretty well. I tried it. I had like one issue the first time I tried it where it wasn't parsing some of the post names correctly because I had special characters in there. But overall, it worked actually pretty well. So yeah, well, you commit it, you push it, you deploy, and there you go. You've got a big blog with all your contents, which is cool. I was super happy after this. And then I started actually looking at the blogs and then started realizing, oh, there are a few problems here. So the first one is that the author, it didn't actually get the real author. It just got the login name of the author. The other one is that if you look here, we've basically lost all of the line breaks in the paragraph. So it's just one big blurb of text. And then another problem as well is that the code actually didn't come out correctly. So yeah, something went wrong there. So here are the problems. There's no author names. There's no thumbnails. If you look at the real blog, we've got like a big thumbnail as well. The code formatting is broken. Part of it is because we have shortcodes. So the turn-on library doesn't handle these. And then we've lost the paragraph line breaks. So we go back. Now you have to start actually playing around with the script a bit and trying to adapt it to your particular blog. So the first one was getting the author is actually pretty straightforward because we do have author information up there. So we can use the creator name to fetch the display name, which we actually want to show, and then put that in the Markdown file. Which is, here's the code for it. And we can use a very similar strategy for getting the thumbnails, so the big images that are shown when you land on the blog, using the thumbnail ID. Let me show that. So that's starting to look a lot better. The authors are working correctly, the images are there. Still have the problem with the code formatting and with the line breaks. For the code formatting, the biggest problem was actually these little shortcodes that aren't handled by turndown. So ideally what we'd like to do is before we move everything to Markdown, we replace these shortcodes by the corresponding HTML. And then the turn-on library will take care of the rest. This was actually pretty simple to do in the end. You just have to play around a little bit with regular expressions, but I ended up with a simple regex that I just put in the script, and it did the job fine. There were a couple of other shortcodes I noticed, so this took a couple of iterations because I kept noticing other parts of the content being broken. So here are some other examples of shortcuts we had in the blog. Here you see that after our initial iteration, we actually still had all these shortcodes. And doing the regex actually took care of that quite nicely, so that worked well. And then finally the line breaks. So if you have a look at, this is the Gatsby version. This is our WordPress version. So you see we have actually lost all these empty lines. So here we're starting to get a bit worried because like you don't want to like manually go through all of them and fix them. Yeah, here's what the XML actually shows. If you see here, we do have new lines, but Markdown just kind of renders it all in one string, which is normal. What we really want is these paragraph tags. We want to keep them in our HTML. And the solution for that was actually to just read the README of the script, because there's a little tip in there which works quite well. So in your WordPress editor, you can add this function in there that will keep the paragraphs when you do the export. With that, actually, we got pretty close to the final version. You see the design changes a little bit between versions because I was working on it, but this is starting to look actually really good with all of that. Cool. There'll be like lots of other little random things. So it depends on your own personal WordPress setup, because the more plugins you have, the more difficult it's going to get to try and migrate everything correctly over. Actually, what I found in the end to be the best strategy for doing this is to maintain your own fork of this, which is a bit controversial. Like usually you don't want to go against the whole open source culture of like keeping your own version of the code. But in this case, it makes a lot of sense, because the whole idea of the script is, in theory, you should only need to use it one time. So it's not like a continual library that you keep using. And you will have to adapt it to your like personal WordPress setup. And a lot of these adaptations are not going to apply to other people. So a lot of them don't actually make sense to push back up source. Although, with that in mind, you should be a good person, still submit like pull requests if you have a fix in there that like applies more widely. Cool. So finally, we're here. You add all of this, you commit, you push, and you deploy. And let me show you like our current. So this is the latest version of the blog that we have. It's still not done, but it's starting to look like pretty solid compared to the previous blog, compared to like the previous version. And you have all the nice features. So like the code is rendering okay. I think it's looking okay. We added some comments down here as well. And it's really nice because you don't have to wait for page load. It's all static site. It's quite enjoyable as a reader. So after you've done the migration, you can start like doing some more of the fun bits. So adding additional features. Comments, Discuss works pretty well. It's what we were using on the previous blog as well. Improving the SEO, there's a nice library called React Helmet that lets you like customize the SEO tags for each particular blog. Search, that was a big feature. The solution I went for search in the end was something called Elastic Lunar, which keeps the entire search index in the front end. So the benefit of that is that search is pretty much instant. You just start typing and get like results directly. The drawback is that it's starting to become a little bit heavy because you are keeping the entire index in the front end. So the initial load is starting to actually like get longer and longer the more articles you have. There are also some other like little issues I've found. One is that you need to like, we have an author called Felix, but it doesn't find him. And that's because he's French. And so you need to add the accent to find him. So there are a couple of issues with that. Overall, it's working well, but we're actually going to hear about an alternative in a second after this talk. Some benefits I had here. So like, it's blazing fast for the reader. That's kind of the whole promise of Gatsby. And if you go back to the Lighthouse audit that I showed you in the beginning, so this is using the same article, and you can see like the gain we've had. Features like, I try and be a little careful with these Lighthouse audits because obviously the previous blog still has a couple more features than this one, but overall like most of the features are there, and like there definitely is an improvement in speed. As well as like some other things like accessibility and SEO. And the nice one is actually progressive web app. That's really easy to set up and have working like with like half an hour of work. Yeah, PWA support. There's a really nice plugin for that. Some more works that we need to do is like pagination. If you have a look at the actual blog, right now I haven't paginated anything, so you actually have all of the articles from like our entire Theodore history all the way back to 2009 when we started it. I'm kind of surprised that it works so well, having to load all of this data at once, but seems fine so far. And categories is kind of the next big feature that we still need to add, because right now you can have categories in your posts and you can search by them, but you can't actually have like specific pages for them. For the authors, we have the benefits I talked about earlier. So you can write in Markdown. You don't have to use that WordPress editor anymore, which is really nice for developers. And you can actually use pull requests now to get feedback on your drafts directly, the same way as you would on your code. So here I've prepared a pull request from earlier. Just here. You just get people to directly challenge it on here, get directly feedback on here. That's something that's a bit difficult to do in WordPress, because they can't actually like point line by line what they're wanting to challenge. And then Netlify out of the box has this nice feature here, deployment previews. So anytime you open a pull request in Netlify, it will actually trigger a build the static site for you, and then deploy it to a separate environment. And that actually allows everyone to see what your article will look like in production. So yeah, I added a little article down here with all the GIFs that I forgot to put into the talk. So I hope you enjoy that. And like the other big thing that I quite like is that all your content is in version control. So you can always like roll back. That's something that's a bit harder to do in WordPress. Cool. For developers, it is super nice to develop in Gatsby. Like, it is meant to really make it easy for developers, make it enjoyable. Installing it is like literally 3 lines of code. You are using React and GraphQL to develop on it, like nice modern technologies. And then here the community of Gatsby and like JAMstack in general is growing quite rapidly, and there's like a lot of stuff happening. So it's a nice community to be part of. And then also it's a static site, so you have tons of benefits with that. One of them being that it's actually really secure. Like, there's no more server. There's no opportunity for you to actually get hacked, which is cool. And it's really cheap. Like I said, all of this Netlify offers you for free, what I've shown you so far. And continuous deployment took like 1 click to set up, which is cool.
How long did it take you to move from WordPress to Gatsby?
So we've been working on it for like 2 months now, I'd say. I can actually show you like the initial. This was the initial thing, which was slightly on Christmas actually. So it's been like 2 months. It's still not completely done. Like, there's still a couple of features that we need to implement to have feature parity with the old blog. But yeah, so far it's been 2 months of like, I don't know, like 2-3 hours per week maybe. A lot of it was just iterating with the content, because we have quite a lot of articles in there actually.
Is the fork of so do you maintain a fork of the plugin?
Yeah, I do.
Is it public?
It's public, yeah. Yeah, if you want to check it out, it's on my GitHub. If you check it out, you will find it somewhere here. But like I said, like, I'm not sure how useful it will actually be to you personally, because it depends on your own WordPress blog.
How would you manage blogs that track multiple languages? So if you migrate them, all the content would be in the same new Gatsby blog, or how would you manage it?
If you have a blog that's in separate language, like an English and a French blog.
Yeah. That's all in the same WordPress right now?
I'm not sure. Are your articles translated as well?
Yeah.
Then they should, I mean, I guess it's up to you in that case, but they should all be in the same export, like XML file. So I guess it depends on like what system you use for your Gatsby blog to handle different languages. Is Gatsby ready for internationalization? I'm not sure if they're doing anything for it themselves. My first instinct would be that you'd have to implement it yourself. Yeah. I don't, maybe you guys know more about this. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing with Gatsby. It is just React in the end. So you can do everything yourself. And it's ultimately actually quite transparent in what's going on. So you have a lot of freedom in trying to find your own solution there.
How did you manage contact form?
The contact form? We actually don't have a contact form on our blog, so we haven't done that yet. But having said that, with Gatsby and Netlify, so let me show you Netlify. in Netlify, you actually have this feature that allows you to, I think it's specific for contact forms actually, that allows you to handle that. Sorry, it's in my other browser. So this is the Netlify page for our blog. And in here, Netlify actually has this feature to like let you directly put a form in your React code and then submit it to Netlify, and then that can trigger like an email to you. So it's quite a common feature. I would suggest checking out like the Gatsby guide and the Netlify guide, because there's like quite good guides on how to set this up.